Good evening, everybody, and after an incredibly long wait, we are back. Yes, that's right, you've tuned in to the Mobileye GT World Challenge Europe Sprint Series here from a sunny and resplendent Monza Grand Prix circuit. My name is Paul Jeffrey. I'll be guiding you through the next 60-minute race, and alongside me, the one and only Mr. David Addison.
Paul, everybody, good evening. It is great to be back, isn't it, for a new season of SRO Esports Racing, this Mobileye GT World Challenge Europe Esports Championship with two very strong entries. You've got the silver class, you've got the pro class. There are new drivers, new teams, new cars, new battles in each. We are in for a really enthralling hour with absolutely no real form at all to go on.
Yep, absolutely. As you say, it's the first of a 5-round season that we've got in the championship today. We're starting at Monza, and the entry list, as you can see, is made up of both professional drivers and silver category talent. Names that I am absolutely certain our viewers at home will recognise. We are stacked with 50 cars. Incredible racers and up-and-comers in the world of virtual motorsport. And as you say, David, there's no form to go on. Drivers that we anticipated to be quick coming into this event have proven to be struggling a little bit, and a few of the inevitable big names are right at the sharp end of the grid. But Monza, absolutely anything can happen.
Well, it's a rather Italian pointy end to the grid with Ferraris to the fore, and the Monza circuit is always one to savour, isn't it? So heading at the end of qualifying into the first round of the championship, it is a Ferrari on pole position. The Williams Esports Razor entry of Tinko van der Velde, George Boothby second fastest from Valentin Barrier. Now, David Tonizza fourth, but we have to say Lamborghini in the same sentence as Tonizza these days, not Ferrari. Wojtek Fiala comes next ahead of Matthew Tiszkiewicz. Charlie Crossland seventh ahead of Mikhail Statsenko, and then Dara McCormack, he's one to watch, but he's only ninth ahead of Dario Imuelo. Kamil Pawlowski, experienced driver, 11th ahead of Luke Whitehead. Dominic Blyer next from Luca Lossio, another driver switching brands, switching teams for the year. And then to round out the top 15 on the grid, it is Bastian Richter in the Mercedes. After that, there is Samuele Villa ahead of Dominic Schoeniger, Louis Fleischer from Alberto Garcia, Max Wojtyla next from Nicholas Arnke, Nicholas Hauben, Tommy Reze. The list goes on and on and on and on. And you can also there, Paul, see the great variety with the different brands of cars all represented within that top 30.
Yep, absolutely. Down in 24th position, Michael Romagnoli for absolute res take by Alclith, with Grantus Caracas from McLaren Veloce, 25th position. Darren King for Jean Alesi Esports ahead of Matthias Tauscher in 27th. Sebastian Apostel for West Competition Racing, car number 12 position, number 28 from Luke Southall, STR Esports, and then Maciej Malinowski, McLaren Veloce, rounds out the 30th, as always, in car number 992, but this time in a McLaren 720S GT3. Down in 31st position, Oster Trangal in the Castle Glitch Machine from Daniel Seraperin, a name I don't recognise, SMP Racing Esports. Marco Yonkers, West Competition Racing from Daniel Teitlake from SMP Racing Esports. Jaroslav Honzik, the YouTuber for Yaz Heat, is 35th on the grid with work to do ahead of Nils Klinkermuller, Mercedes AMG Esports Team URL. Hugo Collette for Race Esports Team is 37th, just ahead of Leon Ateke for the Mercedes AMG Team HRT by URL, ahead of Leo Boulay in 39th. 40th is Leon Hopper for Gridfinder Racing from 41st in the Honda. Eric Del Fanta for the Italian Job. Joshua Allen is 42nd. Alexander Smollier 43rd. In 44th is Jack Alexander. 4 Hondas in the bottom 41 to 44 position. Andrea Miato for Ratton Racing Esports by Clash is 45th on the grid in car number 73. And then rounding out the last 3 rows of the grid, Mikhail Baikov for SMP Racing Esports, Matteo Fignole, the Italian Job, Kieran Pendergrass for Brabham Esports, Jeffrey Ritchie for Aztec Simsport Visual Esports, and then in 50th and last position, Miguel Marquez Lopez for ACA Esports. All separated, David, by a hair's breadth, and some big names low down that order.
And I think they're going to be charging their way through. Again, inevitably, we talk about the balance of performance going into a race like this. You've got new cars to factor in as well, as we have a walk down that grid. You can see the cars now being dropped down onto the ground. So Tinko van der Velde at the front. We're about a minute and a half away from getting this green flag lap underway for this opening round of the Mobileye GT World Challenge Europe Esports Championship. But picking a winner out of this is very hard indeed. 3 Ferraris, a Lamborghini, a Porsche, and then an Audi within the top 6. We come back to the point, there's no real form to go on. We know that traditionally, certainly in whether it's esports or real world GT racing, Monza tends to favour slippery shapes of cars, and the Ferrari and Lamborghini are just that. So if you've got to put your €5 anywhere, maybe it is on an Italian brand. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, I could basically record myself and just play it back on the start of these Monza races, because I say the same thing every time, and it always stands true, David. The biggest task for every one of these drivers, especially the ones that we're looking at now in the middle of the field, stay out of trouble on lap 1. We saw in real life, corner 3 was where a lot of the drama kicked off. If you can stay out of trouble, you're almost guaranteed to pocket a handful of places, but you can very easily say goodbye. It's only an hour. You can say goodbye to your prospects with an overambitious move.
And of course, this is a circuit where you have a chicane down at the Rettifilio at the very first corner, or the sequence of corners, to catch you out. And it doesn't matter what your line is, what your game plan might be. It only takes somebody to get it wrong behind you and trigger a whole load of dramas. You can get scooped up in somebody else's problem. So I think you're right. Survival is going to be absolutely key. And the real pinch point is right at the end of this fast home straight.
Yeah, and with a field so stacked with talent like we've got, we say 50 cars are lining up on this grid. There are drivers that have won pretty much everything there is to the win in terms of virtual racing, in terms of Assetto Corsa Competizione as well. So they know that the start is their best opportunity to make big inroads to the drivers ahead. You see the drivers like Tommy Razia in 23rd position, Nicholas Hoban just ahead in 22nd. Both drivers that would realistically expect to be at the sharp end of the field. So qualifying, a difficult affair, lots of traffic on circuit, not much time to set a lap. There's going to be, I don't want to say desperation, David, because that's not fair for the drivers at this level, but there's a, should we say, eagerness to get some free passes, get some quick progression in order to execute an optimum strategy. And you know what that means when you give a racing driver a target to do something quickly, and 50 of them at a small track. Yeah, someone's got to say hello to the barriers before past lap 1.
Absolutely, but one hopes also that the drivers, and you've touched on this, Paul, are thinking championship, because this is, as you say, round 1 of 5. You get points in each of the classes for being in the top 15, so you could be a hero, but equally banking points is not a bad idea.
Yep.
You get a point for pole position as well, though therefore we've got 2 drivers already a point up, one of whom of course is Tinko van der Velde with the Ferrari 296, the Williams Esports Razor entry, because he, and you can see him there at work, is fastest of those in the pro class and the best of the silvers, and therefore getting the point for pole there, Valentin Barrier, who is aboard the Yas Heat Esports Ferrari. So again, lots of support for Italian brands around here. This is the Roggia chicane, out of which they will turn up towards the first of the 2 Lesmo corners, the 2 right-handers that loops the cars back down towards the Variante Ascari, the next chicane. Then that's straight towards the Parabolica, and at the end of this lap we are going to be in business with, of course, Paul, as well, a mandatory pit stop between 1 and 2/3 distance.
We do indeed. Mandatory pit stop, new for this season. They have to change tyres this time. Previously, it used to be a litre of fuel minimum in the car and away you go. But this time, change tyres, change all 4 tyres, which begs the question, and I'm sure we'll get into when the racing unfolds. Do people run with a little bit less fuel in the first stint and then fill up while they're putting new boots on, or do they run a full tank for the duration? So another added element of strategic diversity, which always spices things up a little, doesn't it?
It does, yes, and if it's going to be longer to change tyres down to refuel, you'd go light, wouldn't you? Because you're getting almost a free pit stop out of that. Certainly you're losing less time, so it is going to be very intriguing indeed. We are going to have some of these questions answered because we're about to go racing here at Monza. 60 minutes then in prospect, not a set number of laps. Checkered flag goes out to the leader the first time they cross the line. Once the R is up, there is that mandatory pit stop. It is after 1/3 before 2/3 of the race are done. And so now the speed quickens as the cars get themselves side by side ready for the rolling start. They're all on the Pirelli tyre, of course. They're all to GT3 spec. They've all got a real well balance of performance. And Valentin Barrier, one of the drivers to keep an eye on here from third on the grid, given that he is the best of those, the silver class. We could even get a silver as an outright winner here, couldn't we, as well?
Yeah, they've got to be a little bit careful of their championship standings, though, David. It's worth bearing in mind. You're looking for your class victory as well as overall, yes. And also there's cash money on the line, which again, we'll talk about in a second, but Mr. David Addison, we're about to go green, so over to you.
Right, stand by everybody. This is going to be good. Our first hour of the season in the Mobileye GT World Challenge Europe Esports Championship is about to get underway. The cars make their way out of the Parabolica. Tinko van der Velde is the man on pole position on the inside line. He's got George Boothby, the Brit, alongside on the outside. Ferraris both. And in a moment, the lights will blink green. We will go racing. Who is going to make the best start with the ominous-looking David Tonitza on the second row on his toes as well. Lights change. Good start by Van der Velde on the inside. Boothby goes toe-to-toe with him all the way down towards the Rettifilio for the first time. Sitting the draft, you're going to get a good toe, but now it starts to become ever so important not to misjudge your braking point to run out of road. George Boothby tries to stay alongside Van der Velde. They've made it through side by side, and in fact, although there's drama behind, sort of 2/3 of the way down the grid and cars sideways in the middle of the road, Boothby had his nose in front just about, going to the curve at Grande for the first time.
Beautiful stuff, and they remain side by side for the rundown now into the second chicane. The Ferrari on the inside, just holding position. So Van der Velde, car number 66, drops to second. George Boothby takes an early race lead, just as we expected. Very aggressive at the start of the race.
And big drama, look, going up towards the Roger chicane. We've got 3 cars in grief coming out of it. We've got more bouncing into each other going in, so the stewards are going to be busy already as a yellow flag is shown heading into the chicane. The top 3 though breaking away, Boothby, Van der Velde and then Barrier going with him. Those 3 just edging ever so slightly clear as they make the run now up towards the Variante Ascari for the first time. Best of the rest in 4th place is Tonitza, but Paul, he's left himself with a bit of work to do, hasn't he, Tonitza, on this first lap?
Yeah, this is danger zone now for David Tonitza. If he lets these 3 get too far away, it's going to be ever more difficult to close up to the rear. And he's the car that's pushing the air on his own, is David Tonitza. And that's inviting the drivers behind, Tiskovic in particular. We know in the Audi is a very aggressive driver.
Interesting as well, isn't it, to see as you have a battle here coming out of the Parabolica, just how many cars already Barrier has got between himself and the class opposition. Dario Imulo is next in the VS Racing by Ballas entry. Right, end of lap 1. George Boothby then from second on the grid leads the way. Van der Velde is second, Tonitza is third, and look at this, 3 wide, virtually going down towards the Rettifilio to start lap number 2. This is game on really for 5th and 6th and 7th. There's a bit of leaning that goes on. Charlie Crossland's in the middle of all of that as well, but he rather gets forced out wide, doesn't he, as they come down towards the braking zone, but he powers his way back ahead of the Audi. They're coming off the corner. So that disposes briefly of Mikhail Statsenko in the ITB Sansalot Racing entry.
Great bit of bravery there from Charlie Crossland, using the weight of the inertia of the car to force the gap. Didn't back out of it, wanted that position, and the job has been done there for Charlie Crossland. So good stuff as Darren McCormack's coming under a little bit of pressure in another one of the many Williams cars, but this time in a Mercedes that we've got on the field. We were saying about Tonitza becoming a bit dispatched from the 3 ahead of him. He's actually made his way past Valentin Barrier as well. So Barrier drops to 4th overall, but retains lead of silver at this moment in time.
So the race leaders then work that number 2. Tonitza there goes through, number 63, with the, if you like, official Lamborghini number on the side. We might get to the story perhaps more later on as to the defection from one Italian brand to another. But right now, Tonitza is hard at work chasing after Van der Velde. Barrier, in the meantime, as you say, he's lost a place overall, but he's probably quite content still to be there as a class leader in 4th place, because he's not under any threat from either a pro nor a silver car right now.
Absolutely, and that's the thing for Barrier. He's be using his head, he'll be thinking big picture. It's a 5-round championship, there's cash money on the line for positions in class as well. So that if you can finish at the front of your class in the silver classification, that's €1,820 coming your way. That's a lot of money on the line to be a little bit greedy for a fight that in effect has no impact on your position whatsoever. So clever driving from Barrier there, just avoid problem, play the percentages game.
Right, so George Boothby, the race leader, goes through now with that advantage, just stretching a little bit. He's getting into his stride now, isn't he? So he, in turn, is trying to break clear of the rest of them as you look at the battles that rage on lower down the order. Charlie Crossland, I should say, still going to push on and get himself one place higher. That moved me from the man that started on pole position, Tinko van der Velde. Still the top two, Ferraris both, and that gap was 7/10 of a second at the last timing point.
Interesting that Mikhail Statsenko is the Audi in 5th position, the only German mark in the top 7 at this moment in time. It's a Ferrari and Lamborghini benefit so far, so Statsenko arguably outperforming his car at this Monza circuit at this moment in time, number 149. And remember as well, for anybody that's well versed in the world of SRO Esports, Mikhail Statsenko has been in and out of this championship right from the very beginning in 2019, always in the Audi. The platform has changed, the physics have changed over that period of time, but Statsenko, a very, very fast driver indeed. So hopefully for him, he can stay within this range of top 5 and top 6 until we get to the opening pit window changes.
A quick look there, number 22, Nicholas Hauben in the Mercedes-AMG Esports Team HRT by UOL entry, and he in turn is trying to dig deep now to find his way up past one of the silver entries, which is Jeffrey Ritchie in the Honda NSX. The Hondas were struggling a bit in qualifying, but right now Ritchie's making that car as wide as he possibly can to keep the pink Mercedes at bay. Nicholas Hauben, you can see, hard at work then, studying the screens, but he's in jeopardy himself, isn't he? He is trying to attack, but he's got to go defensive as well, because right there behind him is Leo Poulet in another of the Mercedes. But job done. It was coming off the corner. Through goes Hauben. He's got himself ahead of the Honda of Ritchie. Place gained. That's 27th overall.
Yeah, you can really see how that car turns into the Parabolica Michele Alboreto curb. Lot better than the Honda. The Honda looks a little bit loose, looks a little bit understeery as well, for good measure, and we saw how much it struggled, even with big name drivers behind the wheel in qualifying. So that's really, it's looking difficult at this moment in time for Ritchie and the fellow Honda drivers to move forward. They'll be grateful that they can get in and make a mandatory tyre stop and put a little bit more fuel in the car. We'll see how it runs as it becomes lighter during the course of the stint, but it's a bit of a turn up for the books, I think, for these drivers. Honda are historically not a hugely fast mark in GT World Challenge in the SRO Esports Championship, but still capable in the right hands of a strong result. And I think there'll be a few drivers scratching their heads a little bit at this one and wondering what they can do differently for Paul Ricard on May 24th.
The Honda's a nice shape. It's a shame that, as you say, they haven't had better results, whether it's in esports or real world racing. But yes, the right drivers, the right team, they can on occasions deliver the result. You've got another Honda coming under jeopardy now. Jack Alexander, Jean Alesi Esports team entry we're looking at. Again, being given a hard time by the grunt and go Mercedes, the front engine Mercedes AMG, then right on the tail of the Alesi team car out of the Variante Ascari they come. Both run wide, both rattle over the curb, but I think Hauben's got the momentum, hasn't he, to challenge on the inside, heading into the Parabolica. He's got the torque out of the corner, he's got the grunt in a straight line, and he's got the line for the corner itself, and now he's got the place. Excellent pass. Yeah, really nice from Nicholas Hauben there. Judged it to perfection as well. Set the car up a couple of corners prior to making the move. Recognised exactly what it is that he was going to do, the plan to do, and then executed perfectly. He's got to be cautious now for the run down into the first chicane. Make sure that the Jean Alesi car doesn't get a run, which it does. It gives him a kiss for good measure as well down the straight. So that caught the Honda out somewhat. The closing speed between those two, but Hauben unperturbed by that one. Gets his braking zone absolutely perfectly, doesn't lock any tyres, and that should be a case of checking out now on the hunt for whoever it is further up the road, but a little bit spicy between those two, unnecessarily some might say. Yeah, I think Alexander, to be fair to him, might have been caught out by the closing speed, really partly because of a toe, but what he then didn't do was attack going under braking into the Rettifilio, so almost like he'd startled himself. Michael Romagnoli is in the midst of all of this, number 17, look, in the Aston Martin Vantage AMR GT3, and he is also not at the moment thinking about gaining places. He's just trying to hang on to a place because he's been given a very hard time indeed. He's up into 19th, but he's got them queued up behind him. He is having to go really defensive.
Yeah, Romagnoli, a great driver. Young Italian man, of course, got to the final of the Ferrari Esports Series in 2022. Didn't make it through to the first place. That was won, of course, by Jonathan Riley. But Michael Romagnoli is a driver full of pace. David, we've got a car facing the wrong direction further up the order.
We have. It's one of the Mercedes that has come to grief, and it is Bastian Richter's car. So he's bounced off the barrier. He has done a fair amount of damage. Something about a Richter scale here, isn't there, to assess the damage, but he's got himself mobile again, but he has lost place after place, Paul.
Yeah, he has, but very clever. Did you notice from Richter there? Knew that he was in problems, reversed the car completely off the racing surface to avoid getting in anybody else involved in his incident. So generous and polite driving, and just what we want to see from Bastian Richter. Hopefully not too much damage either.
Now, if there is damage, he's got to limp on for 10.5 more minutes before he can think about pitting for repairs without losing even more time, because the pit window has not yet opened. So if he wants to get the damage sorted, he really needs to combine that with his regulation pit stop, and he can't do that, as I say, for about 10 minutes and change. Otherwise, he'll have to make 2 pit stops. As you look at Nicholas Arnke's Porsche go through, the Team 1.ff entry, and he's on his toes as well, but there isn't really the width of the road to accommodate the Porsche there.
This is brilliant racing, and this is exactly what you get when you have a field at this level. All the drivers are at the absolute top of the game now. He's looking at Arnke on board again. Just doesn't have enough real estate to sneak that Porsche in, and if he's wise, he's going to hold back a little bit at this moment. Let Tommy Razinger do the chasing of Matthias Tauscher ahead. Let Michael Tauscher ahead, sorry. Let those two squabble and make a mistake, and then Arnke can sneak into that gap, because of course he's got not 1, not 2, but 3 cars for company behind as well. So any half measure moves, any opportunity where he gets balked and held up, he's going to have 3 cars squabbling all over his position too. So it's almost NASCAR-esque for Nicholas Arnke at this moment in time. Either be certain that the move's going to be made, or just hold station and see what presents itself.
Now, are we starting to understand who has gone light on fuel, or are we assuming they've all gone light on fuel? Because there isn't really anybody as such rising through the order because of a low fuel strategy, nor anybody dropping back because of a heavier one. So I think probably they've all adopted the same principle, haven't they, which is to go light. But if they are running light-ish and therefore needing to top up on fuel in the pits, does that mean, Paul, we're going to see them in at the start of the window? They won't be able to run to the end? What do you think?
I definitely think that there's nobody, I would imagine, I'll be shocked if anybody's running a full tank at this stage, because it's going to cost around 35 seconds, I think, to change tyres.
Okay.
And while you're changing tyres, you can also refuel. So there's no time loss, so to speak, for putting fuel into the car. And I suppose to answer your question, the big question is, do you run very light, as you say, come in at the start of the window, put a little bit more fuel in the car and then run to the end, or do you run a teeny bit heavier and come in at the end of the window, put slightly less fuel in, still same time stationary, but obviously your car's going to be lighter / heavier in the first stint. The danger of doing that, if you come in light and intend to come in early, you might have great track position, and then you're giving that up for a marginal benefit. Whereas if you run enough fuel to take you to the closing of the window, you've got more options available to you. And I dare say, having done more than my fair share of these races now, what your strategy is coming into the race gets screwed up and thrown down the toilet almost the second the green flag starts, because it's all about track position.
Yeah, true enough. Well, right now, 33rd is where you find this man, Eric Del Fante, in the Italian job, Team Honda NSX. He is also trying to close on the traffic ahead. We had a quick look a moment ago at the leaders, and the gap had come down. Tinko van der Velde, having now done the fastest lap of the race, he's back up. There he is, look, with George Boothby as they go across the line. Van der Velde thinks about making a move to the inside line. Got back in the draft. Does he commit? Does he commit? Thinks about it, but can't quite level under braking. So it is game on between the 2 race leaders, but the Veloci Esports car of George Boothby now very definitely knows that it's in a motor race, because Van der Velde has now, if you like, having burnt some fuel in the early laps, come back at him. He set the fastest lap of the race, so he may have lost the lead on the first lap, Van der Velde, but now he is looking very imposing indeed.
Yeah, this is some brilliant gamesmanship between these 2 drivers. Make no mistake, Van der Velde had no intention of overtaking into the first chicane. He left his nose there to scare George Boothby, scare him in the braking zone, scare him off of the apex, and hope that he can compromise his corner exit. Van der Velde's singular job now is to fill the mirrors of that Ferrari and make it easy for himself. You don't want to overtake by outbraking somebody if you can help it. You want to force them into a mistake and then get them on acceleration. It's safer, it's easier, there's less risk involved, and that's exactly what Tinko van der Velde is aiming, I believe, to do. Although George Boothby wasn't born yesterday, so that's going to be a pretty sizable task to scare that man off the racing line.
Well, he nearly scared me, because I was waiting for the contact going into the Rettifilio. They thankfully avoided it. Now, intriguingly, even though these 2 are battling, and you could argue therefore could hold themselves up, they're still lapping quicker than Tonitza behind. So The Lamborghini, not yet, and we're only talking tenths, but he's still fractionally slower. Another battle pack lower down the order here includes Marco Yonkers in 203 Mercedes. There he is, that car out of the West Competition Racing stable. Goes very, very, very wide, coming out of the Variante Ascari, clips the gravel, and that just compromises the run, doesn't it, down to the Parabolica. So finally, Eric Dalfanta is able to get up the inside and go through, and he takes with him there as well Louis Fleischer in the Team 1 Porsche.
Yeah, and that was a perfect example, David, and everybody at home. Lose that bit of momentum, and look how the other cars just breezed past Yonkers. Yes, he went off the circuit, but if you can force your rival to do something like that one, or compromise the acceleration zone out of a corner, it becomes so much easier and so much safer to get past on acceleration in a straight line than trying to squabble down into the apex. We're looking on board now, we're looking at Jardier there. Of course, sim racing influencer and YouTuber, as well as driving talent extraordinaire. So Jardier having a bit of a difficult time at this moment. 29th position on the track. I'm sure he came into this one hoping for a little bit more, but keep your eye on car number 39, because I expect to see that one eke its way up the order as time progresses.
We still have 44 minutes of that time, however 4.5 minutes before the pit window opens, so you might now start to expect a bit of shuffling, as we've got a penalty being applied, have we not, for Wojtek Fiala in the Williams Esports Fanatec Porsche. So he gets a 10-second time penalty for causing a collision. It involved Maciej Tiszkiewicz Audi from earlier on, so therefore penalty applied for Fiala, and that's going to drop him down the order accordingly.
Yep, and that was all, of course, the dramas that we saw unfolding in the opening stage of the race. And 50 cars, as I've said, hungry for position, small circuit, the accordion effect. It's incredibly easy to get wrapped up. You can go into these first few corners too cautious almost, and that catches out the cars behind, and before you know it, everybody's climbing over the top of everybody else. Dennis Schoninger, the German driver, now for the run down into the first chicane. He's got a good slipstream, got a good run on the Lamborghini head. The inside door is closed, looks to the outside. They still make him vulnerable into the braking zone, holds on all the way through. A little bit of a tap of the curb as well, a hip and shoulder for good measure. And that is Dennis Schoninger up one position from Luca Lozio in the Lamborghini number 19, now behind.
Good pass that, wasn't it? He worked hard for it. So Schoninger goes through up in 14th spot then now. The timing tower will update when they get to that next timing point. Luca Lozio, dare one say, a bit like David Tonizza, not necessarily as high up the order as one might have expected them to be. Tonizza, granted, is much further up the order than Lozio, but Luca Lozio, for the works at Mobileye Lamborghini Squadra Corsa squad, also much further down than we've become used to seeing him in past rounds of this championship.
One wonders if there's a little bit of the mental game as well for David Tonizza. We saw, anybody who tuned in to the brand new Sim Pro series held on site at Monza a couple of weeks ago, Tonizza had an absolute nightmare. Anything that could have gone wrong went wrong. Contacts, penalties, mistakes, just a generally sloppy weekend for David Tonizza, his first public debut for Lamborghini. In fact, the Lamborghini squad altogether had a bit of a difficult weekend. So one wonders, is there a little bit of caution at this stage in the race while he tries to feed himself into the race and get a solid result in the books and the confidence boost that comes with it?
Well, we'll have a look at Tonizza's efforts later on. Have a quick look at the replay of the start, though, first of all, as we approach the pit window. The leaders got away without too much drama, despite George Boothby's brave effort on the outside that then became the inside. But have a look further back. The usual traffic jam ensues, and there are cars bumping into one another. Then somebody gets sideways coming out of the chicane and gets tagged. But amazingly, they did all survive it without too much damage. It got a bit more Larry, though, at the next chicane. And again, kind of looked midfield, bit of late braking, and then in the middle of the pack, others got turned around, including their Max Voitiner. And who else got involved with him? Hugo Colo in the Audi, and then facing the wrong way. It all became very messy indeed, and that's been keeping the stewards busy for the last 20 minutes or so, unravelling who did what to which and to whom.
And it's so difficult. That's a job, by the way, for anybody who's sort of watching and new to this series. We see 58 go for a run over the coast. That's a replay of Bastian Richter incident we saw a little bit earlier on. But for anybody who's watching this for the first time, first and foremost, huge warm welcome to you all. Just to let you know, we have actual people, live stewards, watching, assessing and making judgment on all different incidents that we may or may not see during the course of the race. So there's a lot of unpicking. With this being virtual motorsport as opposed to real, we have a wealth of data. We can see telemetry, onboards, tracers, overlays, any camera angle that we so desire. So it becomes a bit easier in that regard. But easy and decisions on the 50-car grid on lap 1 are words are not comfortable bedfellows, are they? So a lot of work for our stewards, and a big thanks from us to them for the great work, often unheralded, that they do in the background to keep these things nice and clean.
Absolutely right, and therefore work on driving standards accordingly. So we are now just seconds away from that pit window opening, which, as you see the battle going on here, Alberto Garcia is in the midst of it, number 121 in the Odox Motorsport Lamborghini, and he goes through, in fact, on the inside line. But that pit window opening helps those at the back of the pack, doesn't it? Because they can pit on this lap, whereas the leaders are going to do another one. And again, if you're marginal on fuel, that matters.
Absolutely, that does matter. That's a huge thing to consider for these drivers, and another reason why going really short on fuel is a bit of a risk factor. But also, it's almost wise if you're in that middle zone or the rear area. Get into the pits nice and early, take yourself out of the traffic, give yourself clean air so you can just push and push and push as fast as you can, and then see where that brings you out when everybody else comes down a little bit later on.
So right now, George Boothby leads from Tinko van der Velde. David Tronica is third, and then fourth is the silver class leader, Valentin Barrier, ahead of Michael Statsenko and Charlie Crossland to round out the top six. Darren McCormack seventh. Now, there's another driver that one might have anticipated would have been right up at the pointy end, runner-up in the championship last year. But again, Paul, he's somebody that's gone to a different team for this year, and perhaps he's still playing himself in.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an element of, as well, it's the tentativeness of a first race of the season. It's a 5-round championship. Monza is a difficult track. It requires a certain skill set to go quickly. It requires a certain setup that's often a little bit closer to the edge than maybe one would ideally like, courtesy of trying to strip as much downforce out of the car as possible. So sometimes the sensible move, if you've got an eye on the championship right from the very off, is just bank, do the Scott Dixon. Don't do anything dramatic. Don't go out there and get 5 wins and no championship. Just bank good results. Keep it sensible. Understand where you, the car, the team is at, and just feed yourself into the championship. Because is it Murray Walker? I'm going to use the Murray Walker quote, but I'm going to extend it for a championship rather than a race. You can't win a race on the first lap, but you can lose one. And it's a little bit like the championship. You can't win the title in race 1, but you have a stinker or a retirement or a really low result, you can put yourself at this level pretty much out of contention.
And especially, as you say, at this level, it is so competitive.
Yeah.
You cannot afford to give away a point, never mind 15 for a race victory. Sorry, or more than that for a race victory. Points for the top 15 drivers. Now, we've got 1 or 2 making pit stops. Dominic Blyer, for example, has been in early. So now we are starting to see the order shuffle a little, not necessarily within that top 10, but it is shuffling as the pit stops start to happen. And there are quite a few cars currently being looked at by the stewards for incidents within the first 20 minutes or so. As you look here at the Lamborghini accelerating its way out of the chicane, this is Dario E. Amulo's car, the VS Racing by Ballas, VS being Vincenzo Sospiri, who, if you've got a very, very, very long memory, you might remember in the UK back in 1988 when he came and raced and won in Formula Ford over here. But right now, he is a very successful team owner, both in GT terms and Lamborghini Super Trofeo. The car, though, has just lost a place.
And if you've got a very, very long memory, then try and forget the Lola MasterCard entry in 1997 in Formula One.
Right, yes.
That didn't work out too well indeed. But yeah, it's good to see that another big name in the world of motorsports is engaging in a big way in esports sim racing. It's fantastic to see the variety of teams, and I will say it's not very motor racing-y to make this comment, but I like to shout out to the livery makers of the world. Doesn't this field look absolutely resplendent? Some of the liveries on show, the attention to detail that's gone into presenting these teams and drivers. It could be a real grid somewhere, and I think it's fabulous. It's not just about the drivers. It's just like real life. There's team managers, there's engineers as Leo Boulay comes down pit lane now. It's the livery makers and all of the package together to get these guys and girls out on track and racing in championships like the Mobileye GT World Challenge Europe Sprint Series that we've seen today.
Now, Luca Losio has just pitted, so he was just outside that leading 10, but he was, if you like, the first of the top third of the field to make a pit stop. So let's see whether he's going to gain out of pitting relatively early or whether it's going to cost him. He needs to somehow get himself back into the mix because he wasn't, as we touched on earlier, doing an outstanding job earlier on. Well, there is number 19, Luca Losio, in the Automobili Lamborghini Squadra Corsa entry, back on track. Got to be careful not to cross that white line because that will ensure a penalty. He is doing exactly the right thing and then slots in behind the traffic. So now Losio can go to the end and he should gain places back as others pit ahead of him.
Yep, absolutely. And again, for anybody that's new watching this broadcast, look at the timing tower on the left-hand side of your screen. If it's orange with a 1 in it, that means there's still a mandatory stop to serve. If it's green, that means the mandatory pit stop has been made, has been served successfully, and has been struck from the record. So Dominic Blyer is the leader of the pit stop pack, so to speak, from Luca Losio, as you see, both on track now, which is an absolute disaster. Not a disaster, but it's a disappointment for Losio. He would have wanted that clean air. Now, to a degree, his pace will be dictated by what Dominic Blyer is capable of doing in front. One could argue Dominic Blyer is perhaps a little bit the faster of the two drivers this weekend, so in fact that might work to Losio's advantage, but keep your eye on that one as those cars start filtering up into contention in the big places further down the road.
Yeah, because we had Dominic Blyer, one of the first drivers in, didn't we? And they shared the same row of the grid. It was Dominic Blyer who was fractionally the fastest, so they are evenly matched in their pace. They were together on the grid and they are together again after the pit stops. And there are more of these pit stops still to cycle through. You can see on that timing tower as well, those with a penalty in the red on the right-hand side. And more of those stops now starting to be taken. As also hard at work is Nicholas Anke in the Porsche, currently in 17th place, the Team 1.FF entry. And there is a time penalty also now being offered to number 121 of Alberto Garcia for causing a collision. And again, these being looked at by the stewards are going to affect the overall outcome of the race. We're not far off half distance now.
Yep, and just to be clear as well, those time penalties will be added to the time overall completed by the driver if they've already made their stop or during the pit stop if they haven't done, such as with Fiala and Garcia that currently need to serve their penalties. Tinko van der Velde, by the way, still in second position behind George Boothby, but now, David, we've got a little bit of traffic in play, so this could be an opportunity either for van der Velde to make an overtake or, if he's wise, Boothby to dive down pit lane and get himself out of that predicament.
I wonder as well whether van der Velde is happy to sit there in this first stint. If this were after the pit stops, he might be on his toes a little bit more, but for now he's perhaps content just to sit there and see what pans out. Right now, Boothby is going to have to be the pioneer. He is the first one to come across the traffic, to have to find the gap, and just look, it's a whole wave of cars. Now, part of this is because they've made a pit stop, so they've lost 30 seconds of the pit stop plus the drive time in and out of the pit lane. That's a big chunk of time, and it drops them further around the lap into the clutches now of the race leader. So George Boothby's pace is going to be affected. He runs wide anyway. It's going to be affected by the fact that he's coming up to the traffic, and there's the pressure of van der Velde. But if being stuck in traffic like this does not prompt them to come into the pits and get out of the traffic, then nothing will.
Yeah, this a no-brainer. It's bailed. Get out of this one completely. That is a disaster zone written all over it with all those cars, and Boothby might just be lucky enough to avoid getting into the meat of it before the pit lane, which comes just after the parabolic corner we're about to hit now. So hopefully he'll be confident enough to get to the inside. He shows the car nice and early to the inside, gets checked up behind the Mercedes, and there you see now he's going to dive off to the right-hand side of your screen, and van der Velde tries to get involved as well. Van der Velde taking the alternative strategy, deciding to continue on the track. So Tinko van der Velde decides doing the same thing is going to get the same end result and throws his cards on the table and gives it a go.
He's got a gamble now on George Boothby being released into a different wave of traffic, because van der Velde might be able to clear some of those back markers on the pit straight, but it's a real gamble this, depending on what the track is like for Boothby. And when I say the track, I don't mean the surface, I mean the amount of cars that are on it. So there is van der Velde, who has still got to try to find a way through. Now he's got past, what, 1, 2, but he's got another 4 up the road. whereas George Boothby could potentially be released into totally clear real estate. We'll have to wait and see, but Van der Velde here is rolling the dice. It may be the inspired move of the race. It could cost him dear.
Yeah, I can't help but think that's a mistake for Tinko van der Velde. I see why he's done it. He's gone to the alternate strategy to give himself an opportunity, whereas if he came in at the same time as Boothby, all things being equal, he would come out equally behind George Boothby. And also it looks like David Tinitza has stayed on the racetrack as well, as has Mikhail Stetsenko, as has Valentin Barriere as well. So Boothby is the man that's pulled the trigger, absolutely no doubt, because he did not want to be in that gaggle of traffic. And as you say, David, this just might be an absolute masterstroke for George Boothby, and I would not be surprised when everything's shaken out at the end of this pit window if he's got quite a healthy advantage over the chasing pack because of this very move.
Well, right now, the road ahead looks as clear as gin, doesn't it? There's nobody around him, whereas Tinko van der Velde is having to get his elbows out to battle through the traffic. So, yeah, right now, I'm certainly putting my money on Boothby, but I'm, like you, slightly surprised that Van der Velde elected to stay out because he could see the traffic. I mean, he knew it was there. He's come in this lap, but it might be a lap too late, and he's got a whole wave of cars behind him. Luca Lossio, by the way, has been given a penalty for an incident and then an unsafe rejoin. So Lossio is going to lose time. He's made his pit stop, so the 10 seconds will have to be added to the race time. So Van der Velde is in, and George Boothby has a nice scenic run around Monza for a lap with barely a car to travel in.
Yep, and interestingly, David Tinitza for Lamborghini car number 63 stays on the racetrack. So Tinitza is the only one of the leading drivers, the leading 10 or so drivers, not to jump down pit lane. So everybody's one lap in the negative to George Boothby, so to speak. Tinitza, maybe, I'm not sure where he is on the racetrack in comparison to that gaggle of traffic. He was sort of 3-4 seconds in arrears of the leaders, so he may have calculated he's got just enough clean air and possibly even a little bit of slipstream as well, although that's minimal in its effect. So David Tinitza rolling the dice, and again, you're in third, you're a little bit detached from the cars in front. You may as well, actually. Tinitza's still got a comfort blanket big enough to those behind him to roll that dice and take a risk.
Right, so there is the Van der Velde car back on track, and George Boothby trying to stay ahead of him as the cars wriggle their way through. So Van der Velde is now going to be in 7th place after the stop, but David Tinitza is clear up front there, where the pit window remains open. We have got 28 minutes of the race to go, but Van der Velde has fallen back behind George Boothby after the pit stop, hasn't he?
I don't know, my lifetime in both tells me different things, so I'm not quite sure, but I think Tinko van der Velde actually, miraculously, David, has got the position from George Boothby. I'm not quite sure how that's happened, but that is a tasty advantage for Tinko van der Velde in the 66.
Well, that surprises me. I was watching cars coming over the line, assuming that was Boothby we were looking at going ahead, but no, you're right, he has stayed behind Van der Velde. Makes one question the length of the pit stop almost, that. But anyway, we'll see what pans out after the pit stops. But to be in traffic and come out ahead, well, Van der Velde has worked hard, assuming it's all correctly done. David Tinitza is in then, so this is the man that had assumed the race lead, but now gives it up to come into the pit lane. So there is Van der Velde in traffic, and behind him is George Boothby now with 9/10 to make up. But that's quite a turnaround from Van der Velde.
Yeah, it really is. And again, in this latest iteration of Assetto Corsa Competizione, which is the platform in which we're hosting this championship, tyre pressures, tyre condition, tyre temperature are so very, very critical. So some advantage can be gained from those that can leave their pit stop on cold new tyres and hit the absolute maximum speed, absolute maximum lap time they can, faster than their rivals. And that indeed is possibly what has happened with Tinko van der Velde. A strong outlap, a strong pace right from coming out of pit lane has given him some advantage. David Tinitza, we see a serve this pit stop and retains what will eventually be third overall once everybody's cleared out of the way. Broadly the same kind of gap that we saw before. So really, David, the big winner by a long way is Tinko van der Velde.
I was thinking also that Tinitza looked closer to them as well after his rejoin. The pit stop time for George Boothby was at 1 minute 15.1. It was 1 minute 14.8 for Van der Velde. So yes, Van der Velde was quicker, 0.3 quicker. So it's not night and day difference, but it's quicker and it all helps. But if you add that to, as you say, a good brave outlap, then it all starts to go back in his favour. But yeah, absolutely confounding what we thought we understood. So he stayed out, he was in traffic, and yet takes over the lead.
And rule number one, David, that you should know much better than I: never make a prediction in a live commentary, because you will always be made a fool of. And unfortunately, that one got both of us there. So great work by Tinko van der Velde. And now I'm interested to see, does George Boothby have a little bit more pace in the locker than we saw? Was he playing the percentages game in the race lead, doing just what he needed to do to retain that race lead? And can he dig deep? And can he challenge van der Velde? And are we going to have a ding-dong 25-minute closure to this race?
Well, potentially you can ask Tinko about it at the end of the race when he's in the interview room, and the opening two words of the question will be, what the... because it's been quite a turnaround. Anyway, there are still other battles to enjoy, including Bastian Richter, who is still going. The Mercedes after his dramas earlier on in the race, and David Tonitza's pace I still think is going to be worth keeping an eye on to see whether he can claw back up to the top two, especially if they get themselves together and start squabbling.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, new stint, new fuel loads, brand spanking new tyres, so we are resetting, in effect, the way that these cars are behaving. So anyone that's overused their tyres at the start of the race, or had a bit of drama, a lock-up or a half-spin, forget that. We're on new boots. Now it's pure who's as fastest, who's the most intelligent, right to the checkered flag.
Just had one of the Hondas retiring, as down the pit lane has come Samuele Villa in the Kessel Glitch Ferrari. Right, so 24 minutes and change on the clock. The battle across the line here involves Bastian Richter, who lines up to try to have a go against Alexander Smoljar, real-world turned esports racer, on the run down towards the Rettifilio. But actually, it is going to be Richter who loses out, because right round the outside of him there tried to go Darren King, but King runs out of room, rattles over the curb, one up, one back for him.
Yeah, that's so easy to do here at Monza, and the BMW now just exiting pit lane, starting to get involved in that one, as well as King's losing momentum courtesy of a little bit of air in the first chicane. So the BMW has the advantage, but does he have track position? No, he does not. And Darren King survives just about to live to fight another day. Is Charlie Crossland under the radar, David? Nice little bit of driving there, up into fourth position.
Lapping nicely, isn't he, then? So it's Ferrari, Lamborghini, then Audi, then Mercedes, AMG. Darren McCormack's another one here who's worked his way into the mix. He was running 7th before the pit stops. He's up into the top 6 now. But we've had that lead change within the pit stops. The one that's lost out is Barrier, because he was running 4th and he's now down to 7th. He's got his class lead still, but the gap between him and Iamelu is much reduced, isn't it now? So Dario Iamelu is much, much nearer to him. Barrier, late race, might have to think about looking to his laurels, as also here Charlie Crossland is having to go defensive as well, because he's got Mikhail Statsenko right on his tail for 4th place.
Yeah, this is turning out to be an absolutely cracking start to the season, and just what we wanted in the closing 22 minutes, 48 seconds of this race. Many stories still to be told, many dramas, I am sure, still to unfold over the next few laps. Michael Romagnoli, by the way, also a silver class driver, 3rd position in silver, 14th overall, having a tidy little race further down the running order as well. So good drive from Romagnoli to get himself back up in a contention. But look at this, David, all these cars on the racetrack. Mikael Tauscher in the 92, last of the late breakers, gets the deal done, thank you very much. That is a nice overtaking manoeuvre.
It was indeed, yes, nicely done that, giving everybody room coming into the Rettifilio. So we've got 22 minutes of the race remaining. There's a good scrap going on here as you look at Leo Boulay, who was one of the earlier pitters. He's trying to hang on to a place. There's another race going on, which is between the stewards and the clock, to see whether they can sort out another 13 incidents that are still being looked at before we run out of time, and we need to declare a result. So they are hard at work. Good luck to them. Leo Boulay then in the midst of all of this, down in 25th place. He's another of the silvers. We've not really touched on the silvers per se, but we've got some really good battles.
A hot lap qualifying session. Every driver required to set hot laps on a qualifying server at 2 different circuits, and then what happens is Monza and Barcelona, by the way, and then the 10 best lap times are used to create an average lap time. The average lap time from each track is then added together to create a total lap time, and that will be added to the leaderboard. The top 24 of those will be in the qualifying window to be eligible to compete in the silver class, which is why we've got some names that you will recognise and why we've got some new names, because it's feeder series almost, isn't it, David, to the pros. It's to get new faces, new names, new people on the grid, in the environment, and making the stars of tomorrow. But take nothing away, these are quality drivers right here and right now. There's nobody here for any other reason than they are darn fast.
What's fascinating is to see the way that some of these drivers progress. You know, when my world, if you like, became aware of esports in lockdown, they were all unknown names. Now they're more familiar, and people that we used to talk about being perhaps in midfield are now up at the pointy end, and you start to see them in different championships, different types of esports environments, whether it's a GT car or a touring car or a single-seater. Yes, there are still some of those early star names, like a Tonitza that's there or thereabouts, but others, like a Darren McCormack, have come through. There's a big spin in the background there. That was Richter getting it wrong for the second time in the race. He was on the tail of Eric Delfante, and then he's off the road.
Oh, Bastian Richter, when things don't go your way, they just don't go your way. And that was such a lazy spin by the Mercedes as well, caught out by the car slowing down in front. The car's already unsettled mid-corner, and around she goes. So Bastian Richter will do well to keep his head after all this one, and credit to him for staying in the race and fighting on. But that is such a pity after a good recovery drive at this stage.
Absolutely. Now the lead gap is going up, 1.4 seconds between Tinko van der Velde and George Boothby. So Van der Velde, if he was content just to sit there early on, was able to push once he was released from behind George Boothby, and he is still pushing. So George, if you like, won the first part of the race, but the second stint is very definitely going Van der Velde's way. And unless he makes a mistake, then he's got to be a shoe-in for this. Tonitza, in the meantime, is falling away again, isn't he? Because not only is there quite a big chunk of time between him and Boothby up the road, there's a back marker between them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's looking more and more difficult as the race progresses for David Tonitza. But it's interesting, isn't it? We wondered if Tinko van der Velde was playing a game at the start of the race and just filling the mirrors of Boothby. Clearly, he's got a little bit more pace in the number 66 machine, does Tinko van der Velde. And now it's time to extract that pace as much as possible, build himself a cushion in the closure of the race. Because don't forget, we will meet traffic again before the checkered flag falls, I'm absolutely sure. And Van der Velde, so far, is ticking off all the boxes he needs to tick off for a solid start to the season.
But there's an example of what we were just saying about drivers improving. Van der Velde is a name that we've had on SRO Esports entry lists for season after season after season. I don't remember you and I talking about him as a potential race winner before. Maybe a class win, but here he is for an outright race win and doing it in style. He's pulling away from George Boothby, and he's looking at the moment like the real deal.
Yep, absolutely. And diligence, hard work, commitment and practice pays off in this environment. You have to have talent, of course. Nobody gets here without having armfuls, bucketfuls of talent to bring to the table. But it's all about execution, isn't it? Great drivers that we see further down the running order than we would expect haven't managed to put all the pieces in place that they need to get a result. But the likes of Tinko van der Velde, alongside that natural raw ability, has just delivered under pressure in the most difficult of environments, and a beautiful race is unfolding. I don't want to say too much, David, because we'll jinx it. There's 17 and a half minutes left, and the second I praise somebody, they go straight on into the outside retaining wall. So let's not say too much, but so far so good for our top three drivers.
There's a nice battle building up for 4th and 5th and 6th, isn't there? Because Mikhail Statsenko has got himself up past Charlie Crossland, but Darren McCormack in the background in 814 Mercedes AMG, he is closing. In 12th place here is Grantas Carechas in the McLaren Veloci 720 GT3, and he's about to go through. Is he on the inside? Well, he gets his elbows out and does go through. But Dominic Blyer in the middle of all of that got rather roughed up. That enables Luca Lossio to go through as well, but Lossio's got a time penalty, so it's a kind of phony place gain. He'll lose that again post-race on corrected times, but the big winner out of that was Carechas.
And goodness me, was that a good save from Dominic Blyer. It looked reasonably dramatic on the screen, but having been in that position many times myself, the way he kept that car on the racetrack is fantastic. His arms will have been whirring around like the Playdays bus. Really good from Dominic Blyer to stay in the race, and credit to him there. The number 5 machine holds on to 13th position. 12th it will be once Lazio takes that time penalty, and still some opportunity to sneak his way up the order as time passes, because 12th on the track, but don't forget there's 2 silvers, so he's still on course for 10th in class, which will pay out €240 come the checkered flag, as well as an armful of points.
And if you're under the age of 84, you'll have to Google the Craig's Plus to see what Paul's on about, which we will all do later. Right, battle on. Darren McCormack goes to the inside line into the Rettifilio, gets a face full of Charlie Crossland, can't find a way through there. Crossland's lost out to Statsenko, so that Lamborghini looks like it's just starting to fade a little. A hat tip to Statsenko here, because he is the best placed Audi driver 4th. The next best Audi is 14th, so he's ploughing a lone furrow really at the pointy end of the grid. But again, an example here, Charlie Crossland's Lamborghini, close but no cigar. It's got good pace, but not the outright pace to really run at the front.
And I want to just throw back to a comment that you made earlier about names that are becoming more well known and moving further up the field. Charlie Crossland and Darren McCormack are 2 incredibly talented, exceptionally young racing drivers. These are the future of esports sim racing. Yes, we're less restricted for age in sim racing than the real world. You could still very much be a competitive driver well into your golden years, but these 2 young men belying their age with their experience and their composure, and 5th and 6th position, they're names that you're going to see a lot of in the course of the years to come.
Sorry, Paul, just to say, Wojtek Fiala hard at work we saw in that battle, and looking to try to gain a place in the Williams Esports entry up the inside line into the Variante Ascari, gets out his elbows and leans a little bit on Michael Romagnoli. The Porsche has taken a fair beating at the front, hasn't it? That looks decidedly battle-scarred, and Romagnoli's Aston Martin hangs on to the place, at least for now.
Yeah, a little bit scruffy from Fiala there. A little bit scruffy at the start of the move to make contact, and then went to see the sausage curbs. Another driver actually did well to keep the car pointing broadly on the straight and narrow. So Fiala still on the racetrack, still in contention, but Romagnoli, he'll have recognised that there's been a little bit of argy-bargy. He'll have got the mark of Wojtek Fiala, a name we're not hugely familiar with in the world of SRO Esports. So this will be an opportunity for the likes of Michael Romagnoli and for the likes of drivers who watch this race back to understand what kind of racer he is. And aggressive seems to be the key from that manoeuvre. So that'll be another bit of data just to store away in the back of the mind for a future race. If you're racing with him, just keep that one in mind, because this is what's so interesting about a championship like this, David, where you've got the invitees in the pro and the qualifiers in the silver. There are names that you're not familiar with. You don't know how you can race them, and the more you can learn, the more useful that may be as we progress further into the season, as the weeks, months roll ahead.
Well, right now, Van der Velde is throwing very much a marker down as you look at Romagnoli going way out wide, just being able to dive back onto the circuit and defend the place from Wojtek Fiala. But the Porsche has to slot back in behind the Aston Martin. Romagnoli here is losing touch with Tiskovic up the road because he's having to go defensive, but it's all getting a bit scrappy between those 2. You can see contact coming before the end of the race, can't you? They've got 13 more minutes to go. They're side by side up towards the Ascari chicane, and this time job is done by Fiala, bounces it over the curb, but he stays ahead of Romagnoli. Place gained, and he's worked hard for that.
Yeah, great manoeuvre there in the air, managed to get the deal done, and Romagnoli struggling a little bit for pace in the Aston Martin, although he has got the slipstream for the run down into the curve of Michele Alboreto, but Fiala covers the inside line. Romagnoli is going to get no joy on the outside and just about slots back in, but that Aston Martin looks evil at this stage in the race. Sadly for the Italian Michael Romagnoli, I expect to see that car going backwards into the hands of Maciej Malinowski rather than really challenging the car ahead.
It's round 1 of the Mobileye GT World Challenge Europe Esports Championship from Monza. Mobileye all about creativity, and that was a very creative pass offered up by the Porsche in the hands of Wojtek Fiala to gain the place, coming down towards the Variante Ascari. And so he has gained ground, and he's not done yet. Another Porsche hard at work. Louis Fleischer then comes off the Parabolica up towards the timing line. Now the clock is ticking on down, 11 3/4 minutes to go. So the race leading car, that of Tinko van der Velde, continuing to hold sway up front. But it looks now, despite that really good first stint, as though George Boothby is having to settle for points. Now that's a novel approach, the Rettifilio chicane. It looks as though there we had a car almost abandoning the line, going off the circuit, taking the bollards with it. Who was that out of that gaggle of cars? Well, either way, it was hardly the right line. Jack Alexander it was who went off the road and attacked the trackside furniture. He's kept going, but quite what he was doing on that line, we'll get back to you.
Those chaps must have come from Rallycross thinking it was a joker lap, because
Yes, you're right.
that was a very interesting manoeuvre. And 4 cars sort of wrapped up in that drama. This is another thing that's really, for anybody who's not done much or any racing that's watching at home, it's so easy as a driver to fall into the trap of studying the car in front of you and becoming sucked into what the car in front of you is doing. So if they make a mistake, all of a sudden you follow them in, and it kind of domino. Everybody follows that initial mistake because you focus that heavily on the rear of it. You begin to fall in line with their braking zones, their turning point, their acceleration zone, the racing line they're taking. So a snatch brake and then off she goes. Before you know it, you're joining the scene of the accident and wondering what's happened here.
Well, George Boothby is wondering pretty much that as well, because he dominated the first part of the race, and now he finds himself not only second, but dropping back. Lewis Fleischer is about to be given a hip and shoulder as well, coming into the Parabolica. Jeffrey Ritchie gets up the inside and says, "That's my place." Through he goes and gains the position coming out of the corner up towards the timing line now. Lewis Fleischer is in jeopardy of losing another place. He's got Alexander Smollier behind him. He's also got the Darren King-driven Lamborghini next up. Over the line they come, not quite 3 wide, but you can see now that Fleischer has lost the toe. He's given it to the opposition. Brakes late, he's got the inside line, there's contact. Smollier goes off the road, gets back on, gains a place, but whether that was done legit, discuss.
Yeah, that was as soon as the incident originally at the Parabolica for Fleischer, I thought to myself, is he going to be able to keep his head now, or will he start to get a bit frustrated, hot under the collar, see the cars steaming past him on the left-hand side and go for the last of the late breakers? He did. He was very fortunate, in fact, to not cause a bit of a big accident there with Smollier. So Smollier scooted over the escape road and rejoined. I don't think he's going to have to give that position back, but I'm sure his engineer will be in his ear warning him about what the best practice is to avoid any unnecessary impact with the stewards. But Lewis Fleischer is a man is a man in the middle of absolutely everything at the moment. Welcome to SRO Esports, son. This is how we do it.
And it gets no easier. The battle rages on as far as Fleischer is concerned, and all of this is for 33rd overall. He's just got back ahead of Smollier. Porsche ahead of Honda, ahead of Lamborghini, as there over the timing line goes Maciej Malinowski in the McLaren, which is down in 17th place, but he might benefit because Dominic Blyer has got a 15-second penalty ahead of him, and Luca Lossio has got a 10-second penalty. There is Blyer, number 5, who I was going to say keeps out of trouble. Yes, he does. They are close, but they do avoid contact. And now the McLaren, another nice slippery shape here, commands the inside line heading into the Curva Grande and goes through.
And that was nicely done from Maciej Malinowski. A little bit of rubbing between the two cars, but nothing untoward. That's how you get past a car that does not want to let you past at Monza relatively cleanly. And Malinowski, I think it's fair to say, he's been his fair share of exciting moments, shall we say, over the years, but on that particular occasion that was judged to perfection. So hats off to you, virtual hats off, so I don't wear hats. Hats off to you, sir, my ears are far too big for hats. That was a great overtaking manoeuvre, well done.
So Tinko van der Velde, 2.7 seconds to the good now. He is making this look very easy up front, having perhaps struggled in the first stint, or so we thought, but increasingly now, and we'll have it confirmed no doubt post-race, he was content to play the game, to sit there as you look at Mateusz Tiszkiewicz, the next of the Audi drivers. Now he's also gained a little bit of ground, hasn't he, because he was 14th a couple of laps back. He's starting to work his way into the mix. So also another of the Audis starting to improve late race, Kamil Pawlowski in the ITB Thrustmaster Racing entry. So we're not done yet with an order, are we? There are still things that could change before the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we always say in these competitions, it's a live racetrack. The racetrack's changing underneath the drivers, the cars, and the balance is changing as the race progresses as well. And some of these drivers will have had an eye on pace towards the end of the race, may have looked after the tyres a little bit better, may have inherently set the car up to be stronger on a lighter fuel load. So we often see in the 3-4 years this championship has been run by SRO and AK Esports that drivers come alive or fade, in fact, as races progress. So Yes, 6 minutes, 22 seconds left on the clock. Yes, a couple of the drivers like Tinko van der Velde arguably are locked in now to their final positions, but I don't think this story's done at all.
Luke Whitehead is another driver busy squabbling. Look, Woods gets into the side there, I'm afraid, of Sebastian Apostol's BMW. The West competition racing entry has gone west there with a bit of help. So Luke Whitehead, he might have a case to answer there, may he not, because he's gained a place and a further 2 lost by Apostol.
Yeah, a little bit scruffy, as we've seen a few times now, into that chicane. 2 cars, it's very difficult unless both of you allow racing room for each other, and sadly Apostol was a little bit keen to keep that position, but has been the recipient of a Porsche push, and that has lost him a couple of places. So Whitehead will be on tenterhooks now for the next 5.5 minutes, hoping he doesn't get a virtual slap on the wrist and a bit of a time penalty for his trouble as well.
Was that Porsche to pass? Yes. So,
hey, I like that one. That's better.
That's what's turfed out the BMW, at least for the time being, but we'll see what the stewards decide. They add that to their list. There's no early finish if you're a steward in esports racing, and we are 5 minutes away from a checkered flag, as here we have a look at the move to the inside line, courtesy there of the silver entry of Hugo Colo, the race esport team Audi R8 LMS Evo 2, and that gives him a place. That puts him up then into 29th overall, another place gained in class. And now the recovering Sebastian Apostol, who is in the pro category, mixing it here with the silvers, tries to find a way back ahead. This again illustrates, doesn't it, just how good some of those silvers are. They're not a second string at all. They are every bit as good as many of the pros.
Yep, couldn't agree with you more on that one. It's interesting in virtual racing versus real racing. Of course, theoretically in virtual racing, you've got all the time in the world to test. There's no budgets required. You don't have to hire a circuit out, take a car all the way across Europe to get some track time. So the level of these silver drivers, they're given the silver category because they're not the works drivers. So they have to be distinguished somehow between the OEM selected works drivers. They are in no way, shape or form a second class driver. They just purely don't have pen on paper to a works contract. And I will bet my bottom dollar that at the end of the season a number of these names will rock up next year in pro with a works contract in the back pocket. This is a shop window for them to turn. It's like an unsigned band, isn't it? An unsigned band doesn't have to be poor, it doesn't have to be rubbish, it's just they've not got a label behind them. This is their shop window, this is their demo tape, and now hopefully some of these can use this as a launch pad for a long and successful career driving cars for a living, which is not a bad way to go about your time.
Totally agree. And right now, with more and more battles still to be resolved, many of them are going to be done post-race. Look how many more cars now are accruing penalties, partly for incidents, partly for dramas in the pits. But as Romagnoli heads up now towards the line in 15th place overall, he's under attack. He's still squabbling here with the McLaren behind him and Maciej Malinowski. They've traded the place, but it's the Aston Martin ahead. Now, the Aston Martins, in fairness, not that numerous on the entry list, but they haven't always got the best of track records around Monza either. But Romagnoli is doing his best, and he's pretty much settled now in 15th/16th place. I can't see him dropping further away than that. He might gain a place back courtesy of Lotio's penalty at the very end. Anyway, 2 3/4 minutes to go. I reckon we're looking at 2 more laps for the race leaders.
Yep, I'd agree with that one. And for the Romagnoli fight as well, an extra element to add into this one, he's 4th in the silver category. Malinowski, as well as carrying the 5-second time penalty, is a pro driver. So if they swap positions on the racetrack, they still retain their respective positions in their class. So Romagnoli, at this moment in time, what's the gap that he's got to Tommy Rizia behind? I can't quite see it on that screen. Only a few tenths of a second, so he needs the buffer of Maciej Malinowski to give himself a little bit of a safety net from Tommy Rizia, because this is, in effect, the fight for 4th in the silver category.
Yeah, there's an element of knowing when it's your battle, isn't it? As you say, yes. They're in different classes. He could afford to let Malinowski go, but then you're absolutely right. That leaves him vulnerable to Razia behind him, which he does not want, even allowing for the fact that he'd get the place back from Malinowski, who's got a 5-second time penalty. Are you following all this? So what you have on the track is going to change post-race potentially as Imelo goes through. Van der Velde is now 3 seconds up the road. And depending on where they are around the racetrack, there is probably time to squeeze in 1 more lap at the end of this. There is then the leading Ferrari, Tinko van der Velde. This new for this year, 296 is the model. And Tinko van der Velde, the car looking very un-Ferrari-like in blue and green, but it works nicely, that colour scheme, and he's on his way there, wide, coming through the first of the two Lesmo bends, but he can just about, I reckon, squeeze one more lap out of the race.
Yeah, but it's fortunate is Tinko van der Velde. Some traffic, a fellow Ferrari just up the road, but only the singular car, which will be absolutely no problem for Tinko van der Velde. He's got enough time, he's got enough of a safety net to George Boothby behind to take that pass nice and calmly as Grantas Caracas, one of the coolest names in sim racing, 11th position, looking to find his way past the Williams Mercedes. A lot of pace in that Veloci McLaren, but not enough real estate in which to insert himself. So Caracas now is going to have to pull one out of the back pocket if he wants that 10th place overall, which will be 8th in the pro category.
Yeah, fair play to Barrier and Imolo for being up within the top 10 as the only two silvers so to do. Side by side here come then Schoeninger and Caracas into Variante Ascari. Schoeninger we've seen on his toes in this race, gaining places. Right now, though, he's going to have to make that the world's widest Mercedes AMG to keep it ahead and stay in 10th spot. But now, look, Caracas gets the toe, coming down towards the Parabolica. When does he make the move? Well, actually, Schoeninger is ahead of him in that respect because he moved to the inside line and covered off any potential pass, therefore denies Caracas the chance to get up the inside coming into the corner. Now, the McLaren is going to try and do it coming off the corner, but it has not got the grunt to do it. Didn't get the toe through the corner. It's going to be down to the chicane.
Yeah, final lap challenge, David. This one's always a bit risky as Caracas now looks to the inside, covered by the Mercedes, goes to the outside line. Risk is high on the outside line. He recognises the fact as well, gets on the middle pedal, slows it down. It's better to discretion is the better part of valour, I think, when it comes to a move there on the final lap.
I've heard that said. I'll go with it, definitely. So this is going to rage on, isn't it? All the way down to the wire. They're in the same class. The McLaren gets the tighter line through the Curva Grande, then so Caracas will be up alongside. But if he can't get the job done, he's on the outside coming into the first part now of the Roger chicane. Did get his nose in front. He's run wide over the curb and gets sideways and loses momentum. And that should be enough to keep Schoeninger ahead to the end now.
Yeah, inevitable, unfortunately, but you have to try in these final laps, and that one's played out pretty much as expected. Good driving from Dennis Schoeninger.
Hard racing as well, wasn't it? Which is what you were suggesting we were going to be in for an hour or so ago. Well, Tinko van der Velde, in contrast, has had a relatively easy second stint. He's all smiles as he comes out of the Parabolica. The opening round of the Mobileye GT World Challenge Europe Esports Championship is won by Tinko van der Velde. He comes across the line, a delighted race winner. It is going to be George Boothby who will chase him home in second place. David Tonitza is set for third. Mikhail Statsenko is going to be fourth ahead of Darren McCormack in fifth place. And there the Mercedes comes across the line with sixth going the way of Valentin Barrier. He is the winning silver ahead of Charlie Crossland, then Kamil Pawlowski, ninth to the second of the silvers, which is Dario Imelo. And 10th should go the way. We're waiting for him to take the flag of Dominic Schoeninger. It is indeed number 42 Mercedes comes through then. So, sorry, Dennis Schoeninger it is that takes 10th place. Fantastic start to the season. Great racing up and down the order and battles that kept us guessing all the way through, Paul.
Absolutely. I'm bouncing up and down on my swivel chair in the commentary box like a little child. That was a cracking way to open the 2023 season, and there's still some battles as well further down the running order. So all the way down the field we're looking at Jeffrey Ritchie in 33rd position. There's a bit of a even Stevens gap between them now, so no real opportunity through the final corner. But we love endurance racing. These are a mini endurance race, 60 minutes, but with the insertion of the mandatory pit window, changing tyres and the level of the drivers, David, we've barring a few shall we say dramatic moments in some of the corners, that has been some damn fine racecraft and some exceptional performances top to bottom in pro or silver. Incredible stuff.
I'm not just saying this, but the championship gets better and better every season, doesn't it? The level goes up, the ability goes up. the regulations are tweaked. There's more in it. So, yes, I think that element of the pit stop with the tyre change has really added something to it. So we've been treated to an excellent race, one that's delivered not just good racing, but also one or two surprises along the way. Hats off to Tinko van der Velde. We touched on the fact that he is one of those drivers that's just got better and better and better. Great racing we have enjoyed, and the images of that you can see from Dynamic, our official image partner. They'll be on social media almost immediately, I think, once we're off air. But some great shots will be revealed from within the game that we have just enjoyed. This opening round of the Mobileye GT World Challenge Europe Esports Championship. We promised you action. It has delivered.
Yep, it's delivered in absolute buckets. And don't forget, it's the first of 5. We're going again on the 24th of May at the circuit Paul Ricard, which, love it or loathe it, always produces exceptional racing. So that's going to be a big one to keep our eye out. And of course, Dynamic, as you saw on the screen there, incredible esports imaging partner. But now, Mr. David Anderson, we've got our winners, and it's Tinko van der Velde, winner of the Pro Class for Williams Esports. Tinko, congratulations. How are you feeling?
Thank you. I'm feeling so good right now. Like, that was the toughest race in my whole life. Like, I could say that easily.
And I mean, I need to ask you straight away. We saw you stay out during the pit window and thought, nope, that's a mistake. What was the thinking behind that one, and how did you pull that off?
Well, I knew the Ferrari is like the first few laps out of the pits. It's a bit slower, so I knew I could maybe make the overcut work. But then with the traffic in front, it was so nerve-wracking, so didn't know if I could pull it off. But the first few cars got out of the way pretty nicely, so that was really good. And then last corner, there was still one backmarker who didn't want to give me the line, so I was a bit frustrated. So I just fully sent it into the pits like late as possible. I thought that got a stop go 30 for speeding maybe, but luckily not. And yeah, I jumped in by like 7/10, I think, so insane.
Yep, superb stuff. And just going back to the first stint before the pit window, we saw you shadowing Boothby for the entirety of the start of the race. Was that a strategy? Were you holding position, or was there a case of let's just see how this one unfolds?
No, I was a bit frustrated at myself because I wanted a little bit higher wing to have more race space and be safer, especially in the Scari. But I just didn't have the straight line that Boothby had, so it was really hard to make a move on him, and it's basically impossible. So then I started to save fuel behind him to also get maybe that extra lap and try to overcut. So yeah, I was just chilling behind.
Well, a fantastic performance, Tinko. And we've got 24th of May, Paul Ricard. Can you repeat your performance there, do you think? How confident are you ahead of the next round?
Well, it's not one of my best tracks, so it's going to be difficult for sure. And I think the Ferrari today was a really strong car compared to, like, let's say, Merc, Audi, a few other cars. So I don't think it will be the same Bob next round, so it's going to be a little bit tougher. But if I just keep my head down, do a lot of practice, I should be still able to get good results.
Well, fantastic stuff. And before we say goodbye to you, do you want to give a shout out to anybody watching at home or any of the team in light of this first victory of the year?
Yeah, massive shout out to my team, Williams Esports. They helped me so much over the last year since I joined them, and they just made this possible for me to be on the podium and have a win. So massive shout out to them, to the sponsors, especially. Recently I got new Heusigveld pedals, Ultimate Plus, and I feel like it helped me so much, so I can't thank them enough. It's crazy.
Outstanding stuff, Tinko. Congratulations. You are the race winner for the Mobileye GT World Challenge Europe Sprint Series opening round. Go and enjoy a nice little drink, and well done. Congratulations.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, man. Tinko van der Velde, of course, started on pole position, lost the race lead early, followed George Boothby in the first stint, and then David, the magic move in the pit window, secured that victory and some fantastic pace thereafter.
It was an inspired move, wasn't it? And well done to Tinko. But equally, Paul, a great drive from our silver winner, Valentin Barrier.
Yeah, Valentin,
Hello.
Congratulations, sir. Silver winner for Yassi. How does that feel?
It feels very good. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm happy.
Now,
I'm very happy.
We saw you mixing it right at the very front of the field. Can you talk to me about the mentality and racecraft of racing with the pro drivers and the risk that entails for your silver class victory?
Yeah, so I was thankfully in a position where I had a few pro drivers between me and the second in class in silver. So I knew I didn't need to risk anything. Like I let David Tonizza through in the first lap, and then later on in the first stint, Statsenko was catching me, and I knew I had to let him go. I didn't risk it. I didn't risk anything. Like it was, it's not useful to fight with pro cars when you're in a silver class. And I knew I was safe from Yemullo in P2, so yeah.
In terms of the car over the course of the stint, what is the thinking coming into a race like this one? Do you want to be light on fuel in stint one? How do you plan a strategy, and what thinking goes into the strategy coming into the race?
I think for this race specifically, I think every driver was struggling with the graining and the tire wear. So at least for me, the strategy was just cutting the race in half for the stints, like 30 minutes and 30 minutes was the best thing to do for me, especially that I was leading. So I didn't need to undercut or overcut. So I just perfectly cut the race in the middle.
Now, I think it's fair to say 99.9% of the people watching this broadcast will never be in your shoes to have won a race at this level in your class. Just tell me about the emotions that are going through your head. You've raced against some of the best eSport racers in the world, and you've beaten them. That's gotta feel great, man.
That feels good. That feels very good. But honestly, I think I could have done. Obviously, I'm super happy to win the class, but I think I could have done a better race because, as you saw, I dropped like 4 positions. I was just struggling a bit with the balance of the car in Lesmo 2 and Ascari. I was sometimes bottoming out on the inside of Lesmo 2. I was sliding, so my consistency wasn't the best, and I had quite horrible pit stop, to be honest. So I'm quite thankful that the gap behind was enough, so I kept P1. But obviously, I'm super happy anyway.
Well, brilliant stuff, Valentin. And before we say goodbye to you, is there anybody you want to give a shout out to before we say goodbye?
Shout out to George Boothby in P2, who was driving with a hand and a half, barely a half. He had the left hand injured. So shout out to him, and shout out to my team.
Brilliant stuff. So Valentin Barrier, race winner, silver class for Yassi in the opening round of the Mobileye GT World Challenge Europe Sprint Series. Congratulations, sir. Sensational performance and very, very well done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And David, both our race winners we've spoken to now, sir, and this shows you the difference, doesn't it? Quite stark in that camera. We saw our race winner, Tinko van der Velde, in all the Williams livery, fully set up, and then Valentin in his just home setup. And that's just goes to show, doesn't it, that you can perform with all the brands or without. It's all down to skill.
Yeah, talent will out, won't it? And fascinating also to hear about the hand injury for George Boothby. So it made some of his battles early on to go toe-to-toe with Tinko van der Velde even more meritorious. But even though he was ultimately beaten, I wonder how much of that was then down to personal pain, how much of it was down to the car's pace. But it might have been that he was just generally struggling towards the end of the hour. Well, it was drama right from the word go, wasn't it? With incidents aplenty, great racing, and 2 winners then across the 2 classes that have laid down a marker with a further 4 rounds of the championship to keep us on our toes. We're in for a great season, Paul, that's for sure.
Yeah, we really are. And €18,500 will be spread across the 10 drivers in Pro and the 10 drivers in the silver class. So a payday, a nice payday for many of these drivers, as well as a great performance and a wonderful start to their championship campaign. And I've said it a few times, but I'm going to say it again. The 24th of May is the second round of our championship, of course, live on the GT World YouTube channel. So do get yourselves a little note in the diary. Do you keep a paper diary? Is it digital? Or have you got a device that tells you the answer? Just note it down in that one, because if today's anything to go by, Mr. David Addison, I reckon Paul Ricard got quite a lot of living up to do.
different type of circuit, might be a different time of day, BOP might be different. There are certainly some cars that we know are well suited to Monza. Are they well suited to Paul Ricard? Well, we will find out. 24th of May can't come soon enough. There's lots of real world SRO GT racing to look forward to in the meantime, but we will meet again on the 24th of May for round 2 of this Mobileye GT World Challenge Europe Esports Championship, and that, like we've had tonight, should be an absolute corker.